You are just as good as anybody else, but you are going to have to work harder. And, don't kind of feel like you lose yourself as part of that.
If there was one thing that you feel an organisation could do that would really make a big difference in encouraging more representation in leadership, what might it be?
From day one, always proud to be the person that I was. But there have been, I think, a handful of times where I have felt like, I need to conform here. I think I'm here to try and make the most sensible decision based on two things. One, the information that I've got, and then two, the feeling that it gives me.
If power in the UK has a colour, it's still predominantly white.
It's quite common for a lot of organisations that the senior tiers of organisations are not diverse. And what that says to the organisation and what that says to people from diverse backgrounds is there's no space for you here.
Only about 11% of board members identify as Black, Asian, or minority ethnic.
I never understood the importance of representation in leadership until I found myself in a room full of people trying to have a conversation and they just could not hear what I was saying.
New research shows that fewer than 5% of the UK's top leaders come from ethnic minorities.
There may be a ceiling, you can break through that ceiling. You're not made to be stuck at a level. There is always room for progression.
I can't change the colour of my skin. I'm not going to change that I'm a woman. I can't change what class I am, and I don't want to either. I'm very proud of who I am and where I come from.
We were also talking about being authentic and bringing your whole self to work, but then it felt that we didn't necessarily mean it. We still meant just bring parts of you to work.
Right, Kieran, thank you so much for joining RISEilience. And I think the reason why I reached out to you, you're the first person, by the way, that I'm interviewing that I've never met before, worked with before. But I think my reason for reaching out to you is when I see your posts on LinkedIn, and I think you do Twitter as well, and or X rather now. There's just something really real about the way you post. You don't shy away from saying what you think. And even though you do an amazing role, like obviously by time people start conforming and all of that. And I feel like you kept true to yourself and to your values. And I thought, you've got to come on to RISEilience. So it'd be really good just to hear a little bit about your journey and your, transition into head of service and leadership and that side of things. And completely handing over to you for you to take it away as you see fit.
Amazing. Well, thanks for the space and nice, kind words. I appreciate that. I think that is true and reflective of me and how I try to be.
Yeah.
And I think that really comes back from my family's beginning. So my family, my grandparents came from the Caribbean to England, like many other kind of West Indian families in the UK in the 60s, had a similar experience to many others, some of those struggles, but some of those joys as well. And I think growing up in St Albans, which was pretty conservative, very white, very middle class, every school in St Albans is a really good school, that type of place. But growing up there within a non-British culture at home has just always it's kind of saturated me from top to bottom.
Yeah.
And so I remember things from being at school, like, just when you talk about the time at which you have dinner. And like my friends would be having like dinner after school by like 4:30, 5. And I'm like, whoa, that is so early. Dinner time is not that time for us. People are still at work,
I can relate. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm hungry again at 7. I can't be eating at 5.
We don't go to bed till like 11.
Exactly. And even things like, going after school, people would go back home and be with their mum or one of their parents until the other parent came home. My after school time was going back to my grandparents until my mum finished work and then came to collect me. And just some of those differences and navigating that, I guess, from an early age has always, just been really important to me to not shy away from the fact that I'm different to my peers. But, am I just as able? Am I still sitting at the same table as you in class? Are we getting the same grades and the same kind of outcomes? Yeah, more or less. So I think, that has just kind of been really important to me. And then we've had the kind of, I say we in terms of me and my cousins, that messaging from our parents and our grandparents in terms of, you know, you are just as good as anybody else, but you are going to have to work harder. And, you know, don't kind of feel like you lose yourself as part of that. You know, we've always had it drilled into us that we're, you know, most of us are born here now, but we're not necessarily from here. And our beginning is a really little village in the mountains in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've got my grandparents and some of my eldest aunts and uncles growing up in a literal shack and hearing stories about, you know, brushing your teeth with charcoal. And then, you know, it's kind of like, wow, that's funny because we like now use charcoal toothpaste from Colgate. Like, but those
amazing,
things
isn't it?
it's amazing. And you did that at home, like all of those years ago, because you didn't have toothpaste. Yeah. And we've had that message of don't forget kind of where we've come from. Use that to kind of ground yourself, be humble, but reach for the stars. So I've just tried to carry that, you know, throughout school, throughout uni, now throughout work, as much as I can.
Do you feel, especially talking about all the way back to when you were a child, and obviously that difference, and obviously it was embedded in you from your mum, you know, make sure you're proud of that difference. Do you feel you felt that and you were always, I'm not here to be like the rest. I'm here to be different and I'm proud of that. Or do you feel there were times when you tried to conform and then, you know, it got to the place where you are now? Or would you say, no, from day one, I was proud to be the person I was?
I think from day one, always proud to be the person that I was. But there have been, I think, a handful of times where I have felt like, oh, I need to conform here. So I remember like university. So going to the University of Leeds and meeting some really fabulous people, but maybe like that first kind of, that week pre-freshers week when you're like moving in and stuff like that. And I felt a little bit looked at. We were all very visible because we're meeting a ton of new people. And I think at that moment, I did think, oh, do I conform to some of these behaviors? And is that then going to be my university journey? But I think that lasted like a couple of days and I was like, I just can't do it.
It's
like,
in you, isn't it?
Yeah, I am who I am.
Absolutely. I love that. And so thinking, you know, when I'm looking at your journey on LinkedIn, it's a very interesting one because I actually feel that whole thing of the same job for 10 years and, you know, that is what loyalty means. I think we're in a very different world now. And I think I felt quite connected to your journey because I've always done lots of fixed term contracts, you know, 18 months to 2 years max, continued to move across different organizations. It's quite risky to have that approach, but it's also a really quick route to personal growth. Where did that come from in you to kind of be quite open to moving and trying new things and continuously developing and progressing through?
Do you know what? I don't know because my mum and my aunts are always there like, keep still, like you're moving again, like that is very quick. And, you know, they are very proud of that. But I think they'd like to see me kind of settle sometimes. But then one of my uncles is always like, well, what are you doing now? Because he kind of expects, he's used to it. And he's used to kind of more, what's next for you? So I don't know because I think, like I said, my kind of the people around me would kind of, I guess, like me to sometimes go at a different pace. But for me, I think I've just set myself goals and I've been kind of, sometimes it's comparators to some of my peers. And I'm like, you know, we kind of all do it a little bit of, we have an idea of somebody else's ability and it's kind of like, well, if you can do it, I can do it. So it's a bit of that. I had this thing when I was at Leeds where I really soaked in the people that I was around, some of the senior leaders that I was around, the things that I loved about them, things I didn't necessarily like so much about them. And at that moment, there's a point in my time at Leeds where I set myself a target of being a head of service by the time I was 30.
I love that, right.
And then everything I did just became geared towards that. So it was then in the jobs that I had thinking about, yes, how do I do my work? But how do I also show that I can operate above this level? So what more can I kind of take on? How do I demonstrate my kind of strategic thinking, my strategic ability so that I can progress and start doing that wider, you know, what we do, that joining up the dots outside of our portfolio areas. But that was because I'd set myself a fixed kind of target of this is what I want to achieve by this point.
And I like that because it's not overly restrictive. It's an end goal by a certain point. I generally am not a fan of kind of detailed plans to get, you know, milestones to get to somewhere when you're thinking about career. I like exactly as you say, an end goal, and then whatever navigates you there. But it kind of keeps you focused on that. In moving to that goal, was there any kind of key challenge or key point where you felt, oh, is this even worth it? Or this is just feeling impossible? Or was it quite a natural, easy journey for you?
No, so there was definitely a point before I became a head of service where I thought it wasn't going to happen for me. And I thought that my downfall was going to be because I'm too me and I wouldn't necessarily conform.
Yeah.
And it was actually even at a time when people were talking about being rebellious and kind of having activist spirits and stuff like that. And I was kind of like, I think I'm naturally a little bit rebellious by nature. And I was kind of like, and we were also talking about being authentic and bringing your whole self to work. But then it felt that we didn't necessarily mean it. We still meant just bring parts of you to work that still fit into this kind of corporate image. And there was a point where I thought it's not going to happen for me because of that. And I remember having a conversation with one of my really close friends, and she was kind of saying, stick with it. Because I was like, I need to tap out, change, do something different. And she was like, stay with it, but try and take on these things. And we actually had a dinner recently where she was she's not apologetic, but we just reflected. She was like, I can't believe I was almost saying, don't be as authentic. And she's like, that's your biggest strength. And she's like, it's amazing. I really admire it. So yeah, there was a period, but I think I just had to take myself out of that situation and say, it's not me. It's not that it will never be for me. It just won't be for me here in this organization. And that's fine because there are others.
I love that. And it is, I don't know why, it always seems to be the role before you move into corporate leadership is one of the hardest points when you start really questioning yourself of can it, and then suddenly you're there and it's like, oh, it's fine.
Yeah.
But in that move from being a senior manager to becoming a head of service, did you see a big shift in what you needed to deliver, the way you needed to think, present yourself? Or do you feel like, no, it was pretty similar, just obviously more focused on leadership?
No, I definitely felt a shift. And I think the first year for me was really difficult.
Yeah.
Actually, it was tough. Some of it the work and some of it other factors. And I think having been in kind of policy and loving it and touching, I guess, elements of participation and working with the voluntary and community sector, to then become strategically responsible for those services and think, kind of outside of your immediate safety net of kind of corporate strategy and policy was definitely a game changer. I felt the pace and intensity and demands change. Yeah. And one thing that I reflect on is that actually there's no handbook or support other than from your peers or line manager in terms of how you manage that. And even then, what other senior leaders can offer you is not always the most, because they too are under pressure and have their own demands. So I definitely felt a shift. The bit around presenting myself is really interesting.
Oh, there's a story there, it seems.
Because I remember when I moved and I was like, I'm not wearing a suit to work ever again. Not doing it. I'll come to work.
Did you used to?
Yeah, I used to. I used to wear a suit and I used to, kind of love it. I liked being a little bit, feeling as though I looked a little bit sharp. I don't know if I actually did. I was like, no, I'm going to a borough where, people will feel slightly disconnected with that. And in the role that I have, I actually felt it was inappropriate. I felt I could still do a professional job without being, behind this kind of corporate armor, which a suit now represents to me. So even that, I remember my first kind of couple of weeks at Lambeth, and I was like wearing a cute little hat and, a shirt and like just some trousers and stuff, but not in your traditional corporate image. Yeah. And I could feel the eyes kind of going up and down, and, a couple of comments that were, kind of said in jest to kind of, oh yeah, you kind of look like you dress like you live in East London type thing.
Oh my gosh.
That made it more important to me to turn up as me and to connect with people as me and still be able to do a good job. And the hat thing went as far as when I took my hat off, people were like, oh my God, you have hair. I was like, yeah, what did you? And like, not just hair, like I had a fresh trim and stuff like that. I was like, yeah, I'll still go and get my hair cut. I just
it's not
wear
lazy
a hat.
option.
Yeah. Yeah,
adding, you're taking anywhere.
Yeah. But no, that was also very intentional to show up in a way that I felt comfortable, and hopefully then that transmitted to others that I was working with. So
every time you speak, I think about 10 different questions, and then I think of another 10, and I'm like, which one do I ask now? Because it is very interesting. When I first moved into corporate leadership, I remember as well, I kind of bought some blazers and I just didn't feel comfortable, but I wore it because I thought, I have to, you need the look. And you're absolutely right, there shouldn't be a look. That's the whole point of what we bring, and the value that we bring is it is representation. And if we're then trying to conform and fit into the look, then what's the point kind of thing. So, and then you mentioned the handbook. And for me, I really thought I'm going to train myself up here. Yeah. So, you know, I went on to all the like level 7 leadership and management and strategy and management courses and everything. And then you realize, but I know this, but I'm still struggling.
Yeah.
And it's like, what I'm learning, I'm giving all this time and effort to understand what it takes to be a good leader, but I'm not learning anything new. It's things that I know, but for some reason, especially that first year of moving in as head of service, it's just not happening for me. I still feel out of my depth. I still feel right time, right place, got lucky, need to prove myself. And you're right, it takes a good year. So for people like us where we do generally kind of, we're quite open and adapt and agile with our careers, it's maybe a 6-week max transition period. But like you, I felt that move to leadership was a good solid year of ups and downs, and I've done it or still not there, and just that constant challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And it took me by surprise. It really did take me by surprise. And, you know, maybe for one of the first real kind of moments that I can remember professionally, I felt really naive about that step up and I guess all of the additional dynamics that come with a leadership role.
Yeah.
And but you learn so much from it. I think, you know, nearly 2.5 years on now into the role, I sometimes look back at it and I'm like, wow, that was tough, but look at the richness of what I can now learn from that.
Yeah.
And it is the things that a handbook or manual or training isn't gonna share with us. And now I think I kind of feel more confident to do my job having had that experience, because I'm a bit like, whatever happens, whatever kind of turbulence happens again in my career in the future, I've got it, because I've had this kind of learning experience. And yes, the context is going to be different each time, but I just think that having been able to reflect on your approach to those types of turbulent situations, having that additional layer of resilience to manage those situations and go through them. But also I think I'm such an impatient person as well, which is, you know, one of my, you know, is it a weakness? I think it's a strength and a weakness, but I'm very impatient. So I think that learning to be patient and, you know, ride through the turbulence also and just hold it, you know, just sometimes it's not about trying to change it or recontrol it or, you know, get back control of the plane. You just have to ride it and deal with it, you know, once the turbulence stops, and learn from it once the turbulence stops. And learning that kind of patience, it has been so invaluable to me as well. And I think will be more so in the future.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It is, for me anyway, it was quite mentally draining as like you seriously can hit rock bottom in that year of first moving into leadership. But you're right, it's like training you can't pay for, because it's on the job, you're learning as you go. And if you can just see it through, it feels like you could do anything now. Like once you've been through that and made it, I found it really hard like that 1 year. Do you feel like now, is it about 2 years you've been in the current role?
Yeah, so it'll be, I think, 2.5 years in April.
And do you feel I can now see the vision of a director, or do you feel actually, because some people want to carry on, some people feel like, no, this is me, this is where I think I'm at my best, and that side of thing, or you haven't really thought about it?
So I think, I've kind of always had in my mind, ideally a kind of director or strategy of similar position would be like ideal for me. That is definitely on my horizon somewhere. Yes. I don't know how far that horizon is, but yeah, that is definitely a goal for me. But what I've not done this time is set any kind of limit or time on that. I've just kind of, I know it's there for what I want to achieve on my horizon at some point, but I feel a little bit more like, let's see what happens. So if, another great opportunity came up at the same head of service level, I don't think I would say, oh no, that's a sideways move. I would see it as another step to getting to a director. Whereas before, I think jobs with the same kind of job title, I'd have been like, why would I want to make a sideways move? I want to go up. It's about going up. And so that mindset has definitely shifted for me. So yeah, do you know what? I don't think I've articulated that out loud before. I've just internalized it, that I know where I want to be in terms of position, but there's no real time limit on it. I feel a bit more happy to meander and see what comes.
But as I'm hearing you say it, it does feel very real. And I've spoken to a number of head of services, who are from Black, Asian, minority, ethnic backgrounds, and they are too quick to sometimes say, oh, like, I've made, like, this is it, I can't believe I've gotten to head of service. And it's like, I can see so much more in them. Like, no, this isn't it. Like, there's so much. So it's really nice that at least you recognise that, there is that vision of that next step. Now, we spoke about some of the challenges and some of the lows, but in moving into leadership, what were either some of the highlights or certain things that you remember of, if I didn't have that, or if I wasn't supported in that way, or if I wasn't given that opportunity, I don't think I'd have, managed the transition in the way that I did. Any highs?
I think, you know what, I have to say my time at Leeds City Council was just a whole high. It was like 5 years of high. Yeah, it was great. And I now refer back to that as, probably again because of kind of different cultural upbringing as my upbringing in local government. I was like, Leeds City Council taught me how to understand and be and operate in local government. And I think that I learned so much and had so many opportunities at Leeds City Council to not just my work program, which in every job felt amazing. Yeah. I was really lucky in that sense, but also then just the opportunity to talk to the chief exec about Love Island. And I just like, oh, Tom, did you watch Love Island?
Yeah.
And then learn from chief officers and directors just in those kind of margins of their day.
Did you come straight into corporate?
So I actually started. This is a story because a lot of people have mischaracterized my journey in local government because they thought that I was someone off the grad program that's got quite high quite fast. Yeah. But I actually started as a customer service officer. So I was on the telephones talking to people about their rent and council tax payments, their housing repairs. I did registrars, and then I moved into the kind of children's social care side of that. And then I was doing other work with other departments kind of on the side in the equalities and community space. And then with my kind of academic background, I moved into the leader's office. So I was kind of one of their portfolio officers in the leader's office, and then moved into the kind of corporate policy from there. But yeah, not a traditional grad in that sense. But
that's what makes it amazing, isn't it? Yeah. You worked through and up rather than just came in and jumped through kind of thing. So, and when you're saying you had all that engagement with chief exec and directors and leadership, was that just naturally you'd find opportunities, or did your role in Leeds eventually navigate to working more closely with leadership?
I think it was that switch when I moved into the leader's office. Yeah. And you're literally speaking to the leader, deputy leaders, cabinet in really kind of personal ways. I think that not necessarily brought my guard down, but I was it was just a reminder that these are just people. They're very exceptional and, important. Yeah. But they're just people, and they can have a conversation with me about policy and about, football or whatever else it was. And I think then just with my natural kind of personality, I was just a bit fearless. So when I got the opportunity with other senior leaders, I wouldn't always talk work. I want to know, like, why are you running, London Marathon? Why, like, where do you go on walks at the weekend with your family? Yeah, I think that was just in my nature. And I think all that I was trying to do was just observe, what do people have in their life that allows them to navigate leadership positions, and what's important to them. And it's not about, oh, that's important to you, so it will be important to me. It was more a reminder for me to reflect on what is important to me to hold me up to navigate getting to that position and being in that position. And so I think there was also just a little bit of my kind of natural character, because I worked with some like fab colleagues who were perhaps a little bit shy to ask the chief exec what he thought about
Yes.
Love Island. I was like, no.
Why? Not really kidding.
I'm asking.
Obviously.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting. I don't know if I'm going to articulate this right.
Mm.
But the part that you mentioned about the personality, the human aspect, the character, it was making me reflect as you were saying it, that I find it quite interesting that members or leaders or, you know, the mayor, etc., find it a lot easier to engage with people like us that represent the community or things like that, because we are more prone to just saying it as it is, or just giving that really honest picture and having that relationship and not feeling like, it's the leader. You've got to be really like careful what you say and overly cautious about everything and feeling like it's quite rehearsed. And I've just, over the course of my career, found that people that have worked through local government or even access some of the services of local government that others might not have, or have that level of representation of the council that they work for, generally members tend to navigate to them more. It kind of clicks a little bit more. And it's something I didn't notice until you were just saying it. And I thought, that's a real strength there, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am fortunate. So I've not had really difficult moments with members.
Yeah.
And I know some of my colleagues in the past have. And I think it is just a difference in style. We all know when to kind of toe the corporate line, but I think because I'm quite emotive and
personable,
I'm very personable,
Yeah.
I show my empathy and my feeling about a particular situation, and I don't like to shy away from, do you know what, this is just how it is. This is how it is. And we can't change it at the moment, but here's the plan for how we're going to change it.
But it's honest, isn't it?
It's honest. It is just honesty. And I think that what I've noticed more and more, and perhaps this might get more difficult for me in the rest of my career, is I get really uncomfortable when I can feel people just like really being really corporate and towing that corporate line. And I'm just like, why are we not just saying it how it is?
This happens to me so much, Kieran. I am literally speaking to directors and I'm kind of, why can't we just say this to members? And no, we can't, Aisha. This is, we need to have one version of the truth. And I'm like, but that doesn't add up for me.
Yeah.
We're like, what's the worst that can happen if we just say, this is a position?
Yeah.
But there is that, it's that really cautious mentality. But I think members see through it a lot and they don't appreciate it. And they prefer we're all part of the same goal, really, isn't it? Batting for the same team kind of thing.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've said the most in this time is, I understand.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it is just about listening. I will go and speak to a member just to listen and hear and feel what they're feeling and thinking about whatever the situation is. And it's not always about having a corporate response or a kind of controlled explanation about a thing. It's just hearing it and understanding it and thinking, actually, this is where they're coming from. This is why. Remembering who we're doing our work for, which is residents, and then doing something about it. I think that is the feeling and the emotive nature in me that drives a lot of how I act at work and how I make decisions even, but also then how I interact with members in particular, which has helped me with my relationship.
Yeah, and it goes so far for me as well, because I remember in Islington, so our leader at the time was Richard Watts, and I think I was always just, hi Richard, and some people kind of got a bit, frozen in that moment of, they would literally refer to him as hello leader. And it would just make me, I couldn't even do that if I wanted to. Obviously, at best, maybe Councillor Watts or something. Not like hello leader. I would just struggle, but that is the norm. And that is, so I think there is a level of etiquette there that I probably, over my transition, will need to work through. But I just find it bizarre.
It can be difficult. I think for me, it's all about scenario.
Yeah.
If and I'm sure it is for you as well. If we've got kind of some external folks there, I will say councillor so-and-so, or I might say the leader. But when it's me and the leader just passing in the corridor, I am saying your name and we're just passing in the corridor.
Yeah. And they genuinely don't mind either.
Don't mind.
So, but I see what you mean. Like, it depends on the scenario, who's there, all of that side. But that is definitely something where I think I overstep with the being personal, and it's something that I've got to still work through. So when we're thinking about over the years, do you feel like it was a natural point for you when you moved into corporate leadership? Do you feel like, actually, if I thought like this earlier, or if I believed in this earlier, it could have happened sooner? Or do you think, no, this was probably the right time for you?
Definitely the right time. Definitely the right time. And I'm generally a person that doesn't, sometimes I get irritated when people are like, oh, I've done this for 20 years. Because we can confuse like kind of length of service with quality of work. And that just annoys me sometimes. But the bit that I've come to appreciate a lot more is actually, if you've had a certain length of time of experiences, you, in some circumstances, can be better prepared for a moment. And so I think the moment was right for me. I don't think I could have done it any sooner. But in hindsight, sometimes I've actually thought, I wonder if I could have done with an extra year or so before moving into the role. But then I kind of think, oh no, that's just your kind of like inner saboteur, like, you know,
All you might have done is added a delay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the opportunity wouldn't necessarily be there for you now.
Yeah.
So that one, what you thought was an extra year could be 3 or 4. So no, definitely the right time. I wouldn't have taken it any sooner.
Yeah.
No, right time.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I realise when you're in leadership, I used to be the one that would initially sit at the table, think of what to say that's appropriate. By the time you think of it, the whole conversation has moved on. Or someone's already said it and it's exactly the same thing and you think, why were you overthinking it? I'm in a completely different place now, but initially it kept happening to me. And when you start observing people, you realise confidence is half the job of being a leader. If you really believe in what you're saying and stop constantly questioning yourself, do you feel you did doubt yourself at any point, or do you feel actually you were quite okay with that? You've always had that, I don't know, you come across as quite confident and someone that's quite sure of, you know, what you bring to the table and all, and it's very refreshing and nice to see. Has that always been there, or is it something that ups and downs?
Ups and downs. And I think one thing that I will share for the camera is, so if you ask my mum, is your son a confident person? She'll say he acts like he is. Because what my mum despises about me is she's like, you've got too much time to doubt yourself. You've got too much time to like feel all of these feelings of, you know, insecurity, unsure, being unsure, being unconfident, because you can do it. So I think that there's layers to my confidence. I think I'm confident in a lot of the time when I'm saying stuff because I think I'm very intentional with what I say and when I say it.
Yeah.
So that helps. But I also think that when I have that sense of being unsure, which I've had a lot in this job, is I think I'm here to try and make the most sensible decision based on 2 things. 1, the information that I've got, and then 2, the feeling that it gives me. And I think what I'm good at doing is handling and internalizing that so that I feel, you know, I can then not feel necessarily. No, I do feel confident in my decisions, but then I kind of display confidence to my team.
Yeah.
And I think that also where I am quite confident is actually when I'm saying the things that I do and don't know, and saying things such as, I'm not sure, let me hold on to this for a minute and see what my kind of feelings kind of lead me to, and I'll come back to you. I think I'm confident in that sense, which perhaps some others aren't. I think that's where some people can waffle or, you know, make stuff up because they're trying to display that they're sure of every decision. They're trying to be like, you know, I'm an executive director, so I have to be sure. I have to know the answer. And I'm just like, no, I don't know the answer yet. Let's see what happens. Okay. And that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I love when you keep referencing your mum. I hope she knows how core a part of your career journey she was, because she obviously is very wise and has, you know, I'm already taking some of this to reflect on myself.
Yeah.
When we're thinking about it's 2024, there still isn't enough representation at the top table. It does still end up being, in the main, majority white. Why do you think that is? What like we constantly talk about it. There are constantly roles in corporate organizations to focus in on this. Why haven't we cracked it yet? Is it the ownership of the organisation or the individuals?
Gosh, it's so multifaceted,
Yeah.
isn't it? And I think that there is just a discomfort with difference, and I think people just want to feel more comfortable with people that think like them, talk and act like them
Yeah.
in those spaces, because there are too many, Black and Asian folks that are not able and are not at the table.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, they're able and not at the table. So I think it is a little bit of that. And I think that we also, I like to think about what can I control as a person, and maybe, we need to reflect on what are we doing. And I think but even in saying that, it's so difficult, because I think the moment you try to be forthright or demonstrate, that you should be at the table, you're labeled as aggressive or, disruptive or angry, or all of these negative things. And that hurts, and that is a knockback and a setback. So I recognize that it's difficult, but I do think that there's something in our perhaps not being so safe, actually. I think, we've reflected on our movements in our careers. I think for some of our peers, actually, there's a bit of conditioning, for want of a better phrase, to, you've got to do this job for X amount of time to say that you've proved yourself in this role, or, and I'm just like, no, take those risks, like move, like drop the safety net a little bit, because, one thing that I always think is, if I'm not good enough for this organization, this council, that's fine, because there's 324 other councils out there. Someone will hopefully like me and value me.
Yes.
And I think sometimes it's that, just cutting off the kind of safety, the life bands, and taking a little bit more risk, but that's not necessarily natural for us in the workplace. But I think, if we reflected on what more could we do, it would be that. And I think the challenge for our kind of white peers is to, hear us and feel us, and understand that we communicate in different ways, and we are driven by different things, and we make decisions in different ways, and all of the rest of it. But that's okay, because that's not a matter of quality. The quality of our work is what we should be judged by, not necessarily, the kind of ways we get to the same conclusion. Obviously, if they're really bad, disruptive ways and harmful and toxic ways, fine. But, because I'm driven by feeling and you're driven by data, but we're getting the same kind of quality and outcome, so what? That's why we want difference around the table.
It's true. And also, I think that sense of approach might be different, but actually the end result is the same, is a really interesting one. It's something that I hadn't thought of before. It is true, because all our intents are the same. We're all trying to meet and get to the end goal, but actually the way we do it is slightly different. And for me as well, heading up transformation, my whole job is to find better ways and, objectively scrutinize. So it's like another milestone with culture and trying to make sure I've got the right relationship with peers, but also them recognizing part of my role is to scrutinize to an extent. So it can be really hard. And I think you're right. You can only work through it by going through it, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So one of the other things that are really important that I think sometimes isn't considered as much is having a network, whether it's colleagues in the organisation, colleagues from other organisations that you stay in touch with, family, friends, that side of things. Do you feel you have quite a, and I mean specifically in relation to career, that you can bounce off? I recognised quite quickly that my network were people that were reporting into me rather than and then eventually my peers, but never people senior to me, I guess, because I always felt, don't know how to navigate that. Do you feel you have quite a strong network, and do you feel it's kind of something you need to work on more, or it's in hand?
So I fluctuate on that. So I think that, what I would say is very important to have a strong network. And one of the things that I reflected on at the end of year one of being a head of service was that I didn't have a peer network in this kind of new organization. And I struggled because of it, because it's just how do you navigate this? Where do you find this? And also to just talk non-work sometimes with your peers is nice, is a comfort, is a break, a respite.
Yes. I call it a therapy
A
session.
therapy session, yeah. And I realised that became important. And one of the things that I've said quite a lot since being a head of service is leadership can be really lonely. So I think the importance of a network has kind of really struck me. And I think that I felt my network wasn't big enough or strong enough, and it was kind of there at the back of my mind, like, I need to do more. But then I think we just need to, again, reflect on what's important to us in terms of what a network is and does, and who therefore is important to be in it. So it's not about necessarily the size and the reach, which can be really, helpful across local government, particularly in London. But I think I'm generally, even with friendship groups, I'm kind of like, small but strong. Or as Vincentians, where my family are from, they would say small but mighty. And that has been something that has become more and more important to me. Is it's actually, if I've got a few core folks, which are a couple of close friends that do also work in local government, but not for the same organisation, my family, who I've referenced at every moment, very important to me. And then I think even just a couple of peers, it's about that quality for me.
Over quantity.
Over quantity.
Yeah.
So I'm not necessarily looking for a network that opens loads of doors for me. I'm more looking for a network that, it's different people, but our relationship is built on the fact that we are different, and we're different also to the masses of colleagues that we work with, that uplift one another, support one another, advise one another, share with one another, and, really importantly, celebrate one another. And if that means that, I don't speak to you for 6 months, but you get a win and I celebrate it, or I get a win and you celebrate it, that to me is an important person to have in your network. So yeah, I've done a lot of reflecting on that, and I've reflected on what does it even mean to network and to go into networking spaces, because that's a real challenge for Black and Asian people as well, because we've spoken a lot in the past, I think, about how do we create the space for us to be in those spaces. That's one part of the problem. That space then has to accept us acting how we want to act, because otherwise we've got to go in there with a cloak and with a suit of armor and try to conform again. So there's actually more work to be done, not just in opening doors to those spaces, but allowing us to bring authenticity into those spaces as well. So I've done quite a lot of reflecting on networks over the last few years.
Yeah, it's very good. And I really agree with the whole quality over quantity, making sure, and this reference to people who uplift you is the biggest understatement, because it is so important. And it's really interesting because actually that year of when you first move into leadership, that's really, not even before that, throughout anyone's career of working in local government, it's people that uplift you and give you opportunities and see your value. It kind of builds you up in a way that nothing else will, isn't it? And actually there are people that come to my mind that I think over my career, if it wasn't for those people that really saw something in me and believed in me, and that enabled me to not give up in myself, it's an amazing insight.
Yeah, that I've got a couple of people that instantly come to mind from one of my previous roles, who no matter what, like the three of us, we were the biggest cheerleaders for one another. And not just because, oh, you're my friend, so whatever you do, I celebrate. Like, it was so genuine, heartfelt and genuine. Yeah. And it was that we will do it, and we will be at the table and be there in, so that, for us, it was being there in all of our Blackness and do a really good job, and we will uplift and support one another to get there. That's just two people, and that was all I needed. It's invaluable.
That's lovely. And when I don't know, it seems to me like you're who you are in every aspect. And I used to think one of my biggest weaknesses is I am one version of me, whether I'm talking to my husband, my kids, my friends, the chief exec. There's no, this is how I am, and this is exactly how I am. Maybe with my friends there's a slight balance, but I see that in you, but I don't know. Or is that accurate? Or do you feel, actually, no, I do know how to hold myself depending on my situations? Because I once was taught that is a skill of leadership, being able to know how to present yourself in different situations. It certainly isn't the way I've worked. And I'm always thinking, is that something I need to really think about and change about myself? Or is it something that actually maybe we shift in terms of what leadership should be?
I think it is a bit of both. I think so. My kind of family's upbringing has been about how to present yourself in different, in different contexts.
Yeah.
And I think, so I do think I do that to an extent. And I know how to handle myself in different circumstances. But I'm always conscious of, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that to the point of like losing my integrity and my authenticity. So even in those moments, I have to be driven by my values and my principles and who I am, even in those contexts. So yes, I feel I can adapt, but I wouldn't say I'm adapting at the point of losing myself. That for me is an actual non-negotiable. I have to go into every context being Kieran and being who I am as much as I can. But I think then the flip side, and that's draining. That is actually draining. And I think sometimes I look at people who are their absolute core selves, no matter what, 100% of the time, and I really admire it. But I've seen how that can be
when it hasn't worked.
Yeah. And I'm like, is that because of that person or just how it's been received? And I think that actually, if it was a white colleague, they can be however they want at any time, and it's we all have to deal with it, right? It's just who they are.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because is it because we're too us, or is it because we're not enough them?
Yeah, I think it's we're not enough them. Because I guess when we're being our wholly authentic selves, we're probably at our most different to them. So it's the scariest point almost, in terms of, wow, I really can't relate to or understand everything about this person because it's so different to me. And so yeah, I think it is not enough them more so than too much us, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's important, and I think it's important to continue to just check in on yourself every now and then, because there is a skill in being able to know how and when to present yourself depending on the situation. But like you say, it's also important to just check in on, are you compromising your integrity or your core values or your authenticity there? So just knowing not to go too far the other way and managing, balancing that.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Okay. So this final question I ask everyone, it's quite a big one, but it's just asking, there are so many corporate organizations now, public sector, private sector, wherever it is, that are trying to do so much to improve workforce representation. In some cases, it's working effectively. In some cases, it's just not hitting the mark. If there was one thing that you feel an organization could do that would really make a big difference in encouraging more representation in leadership, what might it be?
Wow, that is a big question.
If a chief exec left it to you and said, Kieran, just give it to me and we'll go for it.
Do you know what, the first thing that came to my mind, and this is so out there.
Your gut.
It is my gut, and I'm just like, I think that the best thing that an organization could do, it's probably impossible, but create an all Black, Asian, and multi-ethnic service.
Wow.
Like, just actually, this, and it would be even better if it was in one that was so traditionally white. So policy, if you can go across local government and the civil service, and Black and Asian people will still be in the minority. Yes, we're, peppering the system at different layers and levels, but we're still, massively, massively underrepresented. But that doesn't mean, like I said before, we're not able. So I think actually have a wholly diverse service and see what they can achieve. And I think that what that generates then is, people in that team start believing and realizing, I am able. I am absolutely able. I can crush it at work. We're doing great work for residents with great outcomes, celebrating one another, winning with one another, failing with one another, and doing so safely. And I think just that experience might just help us think, that we can reach the stars. We can go anywhere and go to any level. And I think that, for me, from a kind of optics perspective, I guess, like what does that look like visibly is, wow, you know, you've got a whole core of good folks that can do really good work over here and have greater impact than just having, you know, we've got a black
network.
finance director, we've got a network,
yeah.
we've got, like, great, you've still just got that one person who's got to then carry a burden that you could never imagine, just being the one a diverse person around the table. And I'm just kind of like, no, actually, a whole diverse service in an area that you wouldn't necessarily associate it with. Let's see what they can do.
I think that's incredible. It's very unique.
Yeah.
Usually some of the responses are kind of, oh, that'd be great, but it's not something new. But I think that is. And it really makes me think, because I have been told in the past that my team, I don't even know this was a thing, but overrepresent.
Really?
So that's quite interesting. And also on interview panels, it can be quite overwhelming if it is a complete Black, Asian, minority ethnic panel. And things that you don't think about on, oh my goodness, so there's such a thing now as overrepresenting, but you've got to think of it in a team perspective, but then leadership, I don't know where I was going, but I was just very surprised that there was even such a thing as overrepresenting, because now you've got to think of the majority groups and make sure they don't feel excluded. So as much as I'm taking that and running with it, because I actually really love that, it also seems to be a challenge in some cases that I just would have never have expected, because that's my ultimate goal, is to try and bring people up with me and the side that we're saying of people don't see their own value, and embed that in them, of, you know, giving them the fail fast, learn fast opportunities that they wouldn't otherwise get. But sometimes it goes the other way, where you realise your whole team is now super diverse, but actually would a white person feel comfortable because you start having banter in different ways and different, you know, East End and all of those kinds of things, and you kind of think, is that now making them comfortable? But
and it's, you know, it can also become a bit of them over there, and the acting of itself can seem quite cliquey and divisive. And I get it, and what you said about the interview panel is so interesting, because I intentionally, in a previous recruitment round, had a whole black interview panel, and I didn't feel two ways about it. And that's because, and perhaps that's quite selfish actually, because I wasn't necessarily thinking of the candidate, but I did think, like, well, how many people have come before me and met all white panels? Honestly. So I get it. We should be trying to find the balance, and we shouldn't go kind of the polar opposite way. But also, I'm not going to apologize for that, because we've also had to experience things, you know, the completely other way as well.
Yeah.
So,
or the reality of having the two white directors on the panel with the person from HR, just that adds the representation.
Yeah, who's not actually, you know,
doesn't add anything
to
the interview process.
Exactly.
Other than just
for the
showing
sake of
representation.
Exactly, completely agree. So it is a balance, but sometimes I think, like I said, rebellious. So I'd rebel in that way.
Really? I wouldn't have thought it. Kieran, this has been an amazing... I mean, the time has flown. It's amazing, but you've given me so much insight in that time, and thank you so much for your time. And
thank you.